welcome back to High Point. I hope all of you are following my videos and preparing more for your UGC NET and JRF, and all of you are doing great in your life as well. So we have already seen the overview of history of English literature and in particular the Anglo-Norman period. So in this video we'll be seeing the age of Chaucer, which is from 1340 to 1400. So before going into the main content of the video, let me remind you about the website that I have for UGC NET English, which is known as www.highpoint.in. You can visit it for more details and more study materials related to UGC NET and JRF, English, language and literature, and in which you will find 900 plus audio lectures and 300 plus downloadable PDF materials, and also previous and practice question papers, and you can attend to them live in the website and know your progress and marks instantly. So do go and visit my website and make use of all the available facilities there, and also you can see the demo materials prior to subscribing to any of the courses. So see and view and comment your feedback in the comment section, and you can also have the link to join a WhatsApp group in which I'll be sharing updates related to NTA, UGC NET English, and also some details and study materials, notes, and daily quizzes there in the WhatsApp group. So you can click the link that is given in the description box and join the WhatsApp group if you want. So let's begin the video. Like I said, we are going to learn about the age of Chaucer. Age of Chaucer begins in the year 1340, roughly begins in the year 1340, and it ends with the proclamation of Henry IV as the King of England. That happened in 1400. So before age of Chaucer we have the Anglo-Norman period, and before Anglo-Norman we had the Anglo-Saxon period. So do learn all these ages connected, otherwise you won't feel any connection and you will be feeling very tedious, and it will become very difficult for you to understand as well as memorize these things. It's not basically you mug up all these details and memorize. That is nearly impossible for a human being to do. But if you study all these things as just as we study a story in history, then it will be very easy. If you go through it several times, then all these years will naturally you can recall them if you study them as a story in history. So age of Chaucer comes after Anglo-Norman period, and Anglo-Norman period ended in 1340. And from that year we have age of Chaucer, and because of the start of 100 years of war between England and France, Anglo-Norman age came to an end and age of Chaucer started to begin. Okay, please remember that. And it is from 1340 to 1400, and in 1400 we can know that Geoffrey Chaucer also died in 1400, and Geoffrey Chaucer is the towering figure in this age. That's how the age got the name age of Chaucer. So we will be looking at socio-economic features of the age and major authors as well as major works these major authors have done. I am not detailedly looking at Geoffrey Chaucer in this video, but we will be doing that in some other video. I am preparing one for it, and we will be looking at in detail about his life, his literary phases as well as his major literary works as well. So let's move on. Now, the age of Chaucer, we can say that the age of Chaucer is a meeting ground of old and new. So it's a meeting ground. It's an age that stands between the old and new. So old means the medieval ideals, the medieval character was still there in the age of Chaucer, but it was slowly it was moving towards the Renaissance. Something was there that was moving towards Renaissance, because the society was accumulating its national character, nationalism was rising, and people started to do some adventures, and they were spreading their ideals and they were going to new lands, and so in that way it was becoming more Renaissance in nature. At the same time, some medieval ideals, some medieval character were also there in the age of Chaucer. That's how it is a meeting ground of old and new. So I have mentioned some of the major events happened during this time. I mean, during this age. Well, first one was the 100 Years of War. 100 Years of War happened roughly more than 100 years between England and France, and this war awakened the nationalism among English people. So England as a nation with its own English people in it, started to grow as a nation, as well as the national feeling among the people where that particular feeling also began to awakened in this because of this particular war happened between England and France. So I have seen a question like this: 100 years of war happened between England and which country? Okay, it was France. And English revived its position as a national language through the great works done by Chaucer, Langland and Whitecliff. So Whitecliff was a reformer. He was a Christian reformer, and he recognized many corruptions going on in church or Christian authorities and church authorities or in clergy, and many unwanted things happening in and around church institutions as well. So he questioned them, and Chaucer has written many works in English language. He has written in the dialect, Midland dialect, and he made this into a full-fledged language worthy to write any epic works in it. And Langland was also contributing many things to literature, especially through his work Piers the Plowman. So English was not simply raising as a national language, but many eminent people of power and eminent people of literature and reformers like Wycliffe, they used their language. I mean, they used English as a language to propagate their ideas, to spread their ideas, write their literature in it. And Wycliffe also has written many pamphlets and essay kind of things in English itself. So so that the common people could understand it. English was, until that date, I mean, in especially in Anglo-Norman period, English was not a national language and English was not a popular language as well. English was restricted to the lower strata of the society. English was only used by the illiterate. All the literary people, literary activities, and all the powerful people, or everyone, those who have power and in court rules and regulations, were all done in Anglo-Norman language, which was a French dialect. So it was totally different from English. So English was actually pushed to the sides during Anglo-Norman period, but it revived its character and it revived its worthiness as a national language through the great works done by Chaucer, Langland and Wycliffe. Okay, and here, through the reformers like Wycliffe, we can see that church authority began to be questioned for several reasons. Okay, it was not that the church was corrupted. One reason was that, but church and church people and church institution, all those things were slightly losing its virtues that it should uphold. And also we could see that church as an institution, it was too much intruding, it was too much interacting with the internal affairs of the country. If something political was happening, church will have a hand in it, church will have an opinion in it, or what is the decision of church must be taken as consideration. So in that way, religion was acting in a very higher way, or religion or Christian church had a high upper hand in making decisions in the internal affairs of the country. That is something which was not an acceptable fact for the people of England. So that for these many reasons, not only for the the corruptions going on, not only for the intrusion to the internal affairs, but many other things were also happening, like this church authority, Pope will appoint many clergy people in England and all in countries, and the country has to give huge wages to these people. So the country, why should a country do that? So Pope is appointing people, and Pope and or the Christian Church should give the salaries to them. But England or any other the country or the government was responsible to give the higher or the huge salaries for these appointed people or the clergy people. So the actually it is actually draining a country's wealth to these kind of not needed things. So it was questioned for very many reasons. Such authority began to be questioned, especially by Whitecliff. So do remember him as a reformer, belongs to the age of Chaucer. Then another thing happened was Black Death. Black Death was a pestilence or epidemic happened during this time, and it erased more than a quarter of British population, and it affected tremendously negatively every other section of the society. Especially it affected the lowest strata of the people because they are the most downtrodden ones, and they are the workforce. So erasing of their population affected every other section severely, and those who survived this particular pestilence, they actually demanded higher wages, and it also became another situation in the inside the country. And as a part or as a result of Black Death, eventually what happened in 1381, the Peasant Revolt happened because of an imposition of a tax. About all these things we will discuss in detail. Now let's see what was the socio-cultural background of Chaucer's England. Okay, and Chaucer's England was divided into three estates. Okay, three estates were there, three sections were there. That was the hierarchy of the society. First section or first estate was who pray. That means the religious people, the clergy, the church. So who pray means the church. So that was the first section or first privileged section or the first estate of the society. The second one was who fight, the nobility, the royal people, the court people, those who are not church people, clergy people, but the other section or the nobility, powerful people, and knight. So they are the second estate. Then the third one is who work, everyone else who do not belong to the church or the nobility, they are the workforce of the society, they are known as villainy. Especially farmers belong to the third estate and they are known as villainy. So villainy was the largest population of Chaucer's England. In the 14th century, villainy means farmers who belongs to the third estate. So they form the large population or largest population of the society of England during that time. Then some of the significant socio-cultural things happened during this time where famine happened, and in association or no sooner or later Black Death also happened. So two unfortunate things happened or fell over England, where famine and Black Death and Lollard movements were happening. Lollard movement means, you see, the followers of Wycliffe were known as Lollard. So that group, the group of the followers of Wycliffe were known as Lollard. So their questioning of the authority of church and the corruption that was happening in the institutions of church, they were questioning it, and that movement was known as Lollard movement. So we can see that revolts in Flanders, France, England, Wales, northern Italy against Pope were happening during this time. Then mercantile class introduced towards the middle of 14th century. See, another class was introduced. So there were three classes: who pray, who fight, and who work. So merchants and mercantile class was introduced towards the mid of the 14th century. Okay. So these are some of the socio-cultural and socio-cultural background of Chaucer's England. Now let's see in detail about the 100 Years of War. 100 Years of War roughly happened from 1337 to 1453. See, it happened more than 100. That's why it is known as 100 Years of War. It was not like they were continuously each and every day they were fighting, but there were times of peace. There were some periods of peace and some periods of absence of war, but still they revived war. And this 100 years of war happened between England and France. See, it's a series of war happened between England and France, roughly from 1337 to 1453. So main cause was the dynastic struggle for the French throne. So French throne was claimed by whom? By English king. So that's why mainly because of the dynastic, mainly because it was fighting for French throne. That's why that was the main reason for this war. And it is commonly, this 100 years of war was commonly divided into three phases. First phase is known as the Edwardian era war, happened between the years 1337 to 1360. Please remember, if you cannot remember the years, remember these phases. Okay, the Edwardian era war. Then the second phase is known as the Caroline war. The Caroline war happened between the years 1369 to 1389, and the Lancastrian war, that is the name for the third phase, happened between 1415 and 1453. Okay, so these are the three phases of the 100 years of war: the Edwardian era war, the Caroline war, the Lancastrian war. Please do remember the names of the phases of 100 years of war if you feel it difficult to remember the years. Okay. So, what was the result of 100 years of war? Both France and England emerged as major nations. So, the victory was not in either side, but because of this war, nationalism emerged among the people of the countries, and France and England, they both emerged as major nations. So, that was the major effect or major result of this particular war. So, as a result of this war will always bring many unrests, peacelessness among people. It will result in imposition of tax, more taxes over people. So, in that way, internally, if you could see what was the effect of this war, social unrest was the result of this war. That will be always the effect of every other war, right? Social unrest, people will be very unsatisfied, and people will be very they will be living in a very poor condition because of the tax impositions and all. Economically it will be very difficult for a country to prosper during the time of war. So in that way, social unrest was the result or the effect of England, if you could see internally. But as a result, we could see England and France emerged as nations. A nationalhood emerged between, among the people of both countries. Now let's see some details about the Black Death. Black Death happened between 1348 to 1352 years. 1348 to 1350. It was a massive epidemic that actually happened all over the Europe. So, a plague spread in Europe in 1347 and wiped out 4 million people there. So, in Europe, as it was not restricted, Black Death was not restricted to England only, but it actually came to England as it actually spreaded in other part of Europe as well. So, the plague was there in Europe in 1347. It actually break out in the year 1347, and it wiped out 4 million people there. So 4 million in 14th century, it was a huge number. It's a huge number if we consider the time period. 4 million is a huge number, and it killed 30 to 40 percentage of the entire population of England. See how massive it was. Plague actually killed, this Black Death killed 30 to 40 percentage of the entire population of the England. Only in England. I'm not talking about Europe as such, but in England, 30 to 40 percentage of the entire population was affected and killed because of it. The agricultural sector affected negatively. Why? Because agricultural workforce as well as farmers, the villainy, they forms the lowest strata of the society. So whenever something like this, a pestilence or epidemic happens, what will happen? It will severely, the first section that will get affected by it will be the lower strata of the society. So the agricultural sector affected negatively. Because of that, every other section. So it doesn't mean that this epidemic only killed the agricultural or the lower strata people, but naturally the effect was great in their section, and because of that, every other section of the society get affected negatively. So which are some of the effects of the Black Death? So because of that, the workforce was actually reduced. The population of the workforce got reduced, and those who survived, the peasants who survived, they demanded increase in wages. So they demanded increased wages for the works they are doing because they are fewer in number. And 40% of the priests died. See, the church people, they form the first estate in this society. But 40% of the priests also died. So there will be a gap. So there formed a gap. In order to fill that gap, actually church had to appoint poorly trained applicants. That accelerated the decline of the church. So when they appointed, this church appointed poorly trained applicants, that means poorly trained priests, in order to fill the gap that was formed because of the death of 40% of the priest. What happened? It accelerated the decline of the church. They don't know how to deal with a certain thing because they are poorly trained, and they don't know how to deal with people. They don't know how to deal with the authorities. So that will also accelerated the corruption in the institution of the church very fast, accelerated it, so that in a way this Black Death affected every other sphere of the society. So as a result of this Black Death, eventually in 1381 the Peasants Revolt happened. Please remember this year and also this event, the Peasants Revolt. So please remember the 100 Years of War, then remember the Black Death, then you have to remember the Peasants Revolt. Please, study it as connected. So the immediate cause was for the revolt was the imposition of the poll tax. Imposition of the 100 years of war was happening. So money is needed, severely needed to finance the war. So imposition of the poll tax over the peasants. No, peasants were actually, because of this Black Death, the survived peasants, they demanded higher wages. So it was like because of that, and always taxes will be imposed on poor class only, more and more tax. So causes was the imposition of the poll tax third time in the 4 years. So during the time period of 4 years, poll tax was imposed third time again. So it was like everyone over the age of 15 has to pay 1 shilling. So if you are not working, if you are working, that doesn't matter. Even if you are working or not, if you are over the age of 15, you have to pay 1 shilling. So that was the condition of the poll tax imposed this time, third time. So it was unbearable for the peasants. You have to pay 1 shilling even if you are working or not. If your age is more than 15, then you have to pay 1 shilling. And this tax was imposed a third time in the 4 year in the 4 years. So that was quite unbearable. So they could not afford it and they didn't care to pay the tax. So non-payment led to official investigation. So what happened? These farmers, they remained, careless to pay the tax. They didn't care to pay the tax. They could not afford it. When they remained, without paying the tax, official investigations started. People from official government authorities, ruling authorities, they came to investigate here in the villages why they are not paying the taxes. So one among such kind of an investigation which was done by John Bampton. So an official investigator who came to a village came to the local people to investigate about the non-payment of taxes. So John Bampton, he came as a government official to investigate upon this non-payment of taxes. And when he came, the local people reacted to him physically. The local people made some damages to John Bampton. People actually violently reacted to him, and this spread to the entire country gradually. See this, severe reaction, this angry reaction, which was made to an official investigator. This action, this example was spreaded to the entire country gradually. So this uprising later began to spread as a country whole, that is known as the Peasants Revolt. So Wat Tyler, he emerged as the leader of the revolt. Wat Tyler emerged as the leader of the revolt. As it spread throughout the country, a leader emerged. Wat Tyler emerged, and the king Charles II agreed to meet him. So the revolt became so popular, and there were no other choice for the king to talk to its leader. So gradually, King Charles II, he agreed to meet him. So during the second meeting between them, an argument broke out and Tyler was killed. Thus the end of the revolt. So what happened? He met the king. Wat Tyler met the king Charles II for the first time, and his demands. The king said that he will consider their demands. And when a second meeting was going on between the king and Wat Tyler, an argument broke out. Suddenly he was arguing with the king. Then what will happen? Tyler got killed, and because it lost its leader, what happened? The revolt came to an end. The peasants' revolt came to an end with the death of Tyler, as he was killed when an argument broke out between him and the king during the second meeting between them. Okay. Then now let's see some literary trends. Before that, please remember 100 Years of War and the Lollard movement, and also what happened, the Black Death, and also as a gradually in 1381 what happened, the Peasants Revolt also. Please remember the leader of Peasant Revolt as well. Now let's see some of the literary trends of the age. Alliterative poetry, it was revived. So it was in Anglo-Saxon period. We could see some lyrics, ballads, and some poetry were slowly started to progress in English language, and it got revived in the age of Chaucer in the form of alliterative poetry. Then romances were written in it. So romances mainly composed in the form of alliterative poetry. So the main form of poetry was alliterative poetry, and romances were also written in this form of alliterative poetry. In the late 14th century, the language of the court was made English from Anglo-Norman. So we could see that how English officially became the national language of England in the late 14th century. Towards the end of 14th century only, the language of the court was officially made into English from Anglo-Norman. So we could see in alliterative poetry themes like high moral seriousness. So themes of high moral seriousness we could see in alliterative poetry. So alliterative poetries were written in the theme of high moral seriousness, about moral things, and high serious moral themes were written in alliterative poetry. Use of Northern and Western English dialects. So in order to write alliterative poetry, they mainly used Northern as well as Western English dialects. It was not East Midland dialect, but for writing alliterative poetry, the poets used Northern and Western English dialects. So the prime example of alliterative poetry is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So this is very important. Sir Gawain and Green Knight. About Gawain and Green Knight, I have held it in detail in my website. You can look at it, www.highpoint.in. You can go and you can see it, and I have also given PDF notes about Sir Gawain and Green Knight. So Sir Gawain and Green Knight is a prime example for alliterative poetry, belongs to the age of Chaucer. Let's see some of the romances, and romances were also written in alliterative poetry in that form only. Then the Tale of Gamelin. which came out in 1350s. Tale of Gamline, William and Werewolf. These are some of the popular romances. The Tale of Gamline. Remember the names, at least the names. If you don't, if you cannot remember the age, or if you cannot remember the particular year of publication, at least remember the names as well as the age in which it belongs. Of if there is an author, please remember the author as well. So that will help you in many ways. The Tale of Gamline and William and the Werewolf. These are the major romances of age of Chaucer. Now, let's see the literary giant of this period, Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer. About Geoffrey Chaucer, I am doing another video. So, I'll be looking at main points related to Geoffrey Chaucer. Please don't get worried about it. But we will be looking at him, his life, his literary phases and his major works and their themes, everything in detail in another video. Okay. Geoffrey Chaucer, he lived from 1343 to 1400. So, Geoffrey Chaucer's lifespan is from 1343 to 1400. See, he also died in 1400 and the age also ends in 1400. He was born in Windry and his father was a wine merchant. So, Windry is a particular street in or a particular place in London in which mainly wine merchants will live. Windry. Okay, so Geoffrey Chaucer's father was a wine merchant, so he was born in Windry, which is a place in London, and he served as page to Elizabeth and Elizabeth, Countess of Ulster. So he was, when he was a boy, he was served as a page to Elizabeth, and Countess of Elizabeth was the Countess of Ulster. So basically, his father provided wine for the royal people, especially in palace. So, he was there as a page and he learned French and Latin from the court. Learned because he was very close to the court. We was serving as a page to Elizabeth. So, he learned French and Latin from there and gradually he got a patron. His patron was John of Gaunt. Okay. Patron's name was John of Gaunt. So, remember his name, John of Gaunt. And his first major work was the book of the Duchess. So actually his patron John of Gaunt asked Chaucer to write a book, the book of the Duchess in English. Okay, so this was his first work and he composed this work between 1368 and 69, which was asked by John of Gaunt. See, I have mentioned it here. And the next important work was The House of Fame. Came out or he composed between 1379 and 80. The Parliament of Fowls, the next one, he composed it in 1380s, and Troilus and Cresside, he composed it in 1378, between 1378 and 1385. Then comes The Legend of Good Women, composed in 1380s, and lastly the major work, and Geoffrey Chaucer is mainly known for and admired for this particular work, the Canterbury Tales, which is an unfinished work. He has written this work from 1386 to 1395, and he is considered as the father of English literature, especially father of English poetry, and he was the first one to bury the Poets' Corner of the Westminster Abbey. Okay, so he is considered as the father of English literature or father of English poetry mainly, and he is the first one to bury in the Poets' Corner of the Westminster Abbey. So please do remember some of the details that I shared about Chaucer. Please remember that his patron's name and as well as the names of his major works. About all this we'll be looking in detail in another video. And now let's see some of the major points about the Geoffrey Chaucer's main work, the Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales, he actually worked upon this work from 1386 to 95. So what was the plan of this tale? So this is a tale, this is a book. It's a collection of stories narrated by 29 pilgrims. Please do remember that this work contained 29 pilgrims. 29 pilgrims were there. Please remember that. Questions often, I have seen questions like how many pilgrims were there, how many pilgrims were there in Canterbury Tales. So 29 pilgrims were there. So they were on their way to the shrine of martyr Saint Thomas Becket in Canterbury. So these pilgrims, they were traveling to the shrine of martyr Saint Thomas Becket in Canterbury, and they actually, the plan of the book was like that. They, each one of them, they will narrate two stories as they were traveling to the shrine, and in return also each one will narrate two stories. So in that way was the original plan, but he could not finish the story, and it contained a prologue, like I said, and it provided the details. This prologue provided the details about the characters from different strata of England. See, 29 pilgrims were there. They were from different strata of the England, from upper class to very lower class. We could find pilgrims from every other strata of England. It is a cross section of England's society, and it contained this work prologue is actually providing characters peculiarities from different strata of England. And originally Chaucer planned to have 120 tales, but he could only finish 24 of them. And he used not the northern or the western dialect of English, but he used the East Midland dialect of English in order to compose Canterbury Tales. So he actually wrote every other work in English only, but especially in Canterbury Tales you can see East Midland dialect of England, and he made this particular dialect as the as a worthy dialect of English itself. And in this work, in Canterbury Tales, we could see that Harry Bailey was the host of Tabardin. So every other 29, these 29 pilgrims, they gathered in this inn before starting their voyage, or before starting their journey to the shrine of Saint Thomas Becket. So Tabardin, they gathered in Tabardin, and the host of the inn was Harry Bailey, and he proposed the storytelling game in order to lessen the tediousness of the long journey. So please remember the name Harry Bailey and the inn's name Tabard Inn. Okay. Now let's see some of the major contemporaries of Geoffrey Chaucer. William Langland is the first one. William Langland, he lived from 1330 to 1386, and he authored a remarkable work known as Piers the Plowman. So I have seen several questions related to Piers the Plowman. The full title of Piers the Plowman is The Vision of William Concerning Piers the Plowman. So this is the full title. The Vision of William Concerning Piers the Plowman, and he composed this particular work around the year 1379. Okay, William of Langland, he is a great contemporary of Chaucer, and he composed his remarkable work Piers the Plowman in around the year 1379. It's an allegorical poem in rhymed alliterative verse. So alliterative poetry was the major form of poetry of this age. So he composed Piers the Plowman it's an allegorical poem in unrhymed alliterative verse. And he employed a dream vision. Dream vision means the main character will see a dream, and the main content of the poem will happen in that dream. Okay, somehow the narrator, or somehow the major character of the poem will fall asleep, and in that sleep the character will see a dream vision, and the major part of the poem will be about that dream vision, what the main person sees as a dream. Okay, so he employed dream vision, and Chaucer also employed dream vision in almost all of his works as well. So the leading character's name is Piers. Piers is the leading character. Lead character is Piers, who is a hard-working, sincere, and honest plowman. Okay, so the lead character is Piers, a hard-working. Piers is a hard-working, sincere, honest plowman, a peasant. So it's a social satire and a vision of simple Christian life. So Pierce is a believer. He is a Christian, and he actually sees a dream, and it's a social satire, and it gives a vision. How could you live a simple Christian life? Even in your humble background, how could you live a simple Christian life? That is portrayed in this work, and also it's a social satire. And many believe that it encouraged the peasants' revolt. So a question can be asked: which work among the following list encouraged the peasant revolt in the 14th century? So you have to recognize it as Piers the Plowman. Okay. And William Langland also condemned the practice of religious classes and sympathized with the sufferings of the poor in this particular work, Piers the Plowman. He condemned the practice of religious class. See, the upper class, the first estate people, they were living a very lavish life. They were having very corrupted life. They are clergy people. They follow some virtues, but they were not doing it. They are corruptious practices, their lavish life, their indulged life, and all condemned, all criticized in this work, as well as he sympathized with the sufferings of the poor people by portraying a vision of simple Christian life. The next contemporary of Chaucer is John Gower. John Gower lived from 1330 to 1408. Okay, John Gower, he lived from 1330 to 1408, and he is a court poet. So court poet means who will actually compose poems for court, and he will sing there, and he will have some money out of it. He will make a living out of it. So John Gower, he was a court poet. So according to David Datches, Gower was a more typical representative of his age and class than Chaucer could claim to be. So this is a quotation made by David Datches, in which he says that John Gower is a more typical representative than Chaucer of age of Chaucer. Okay. So mainly he gave more acclaim for John Gower as a more typical representative of age of Chaucer, not Geoffrey Chaucer. Now let's see some of the major works of John Gower, Mirror de l'Homme or Specula Meditantis. So this particular work is famous as this Specula Meditantis. Specula Meditantis is his first work, Mirror de l'Homme or Specula Meditantis. Vos Clamandis. Vos Clamandis is translated as the voice of the crying out. Confessio Amandis, the lover's confession. So these are the major works by Gower: Specula Meditantis, Vos Clamandis, Confessio Amandis. So we can learn this as a group, like a rhymed one. Specula Meditantis, Vos Clamandis, Confessio Amandis. Okay, and Confessio Amandis is dedicated to Henry of Derby, the son of John of Gaunt. John of Gaunt is the patron of Chaucer. So Confessio Amandis is dedicated to Henry of Derby, the son of John of Gaunt. Okay. Now let's see John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe is known as the morning star of the Reformation. So he was a reformer of age of Chaucer, John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe lived from 1330 to 1384. So he lived from 1330 to 1384. So he made the first complete translation of the Bible from Latin to Middle English. So he translated Bible from Latin to Middle English. Okay. So that was the first complete translation. And he argued that church had fallen into sin. So he mainly questioned the corruptions that is going on in and around church and church institution. The people were living very sinful life, and people were having very lavish, indulged, wealthy kind of, it was not wealthy, but they were having very lavish kind of life. People, the common people, they were ignorant about the Bible. They don't know how to read and understand Bible. They don't know. They were illiterate. So these church people, they were actually exploiting the ignorance of these common people, and Wycliffe understood this. That's why he made a translation of Bible from Latin to Middle English, so that those who know English, they could read and understand this Bible and understand how they should live according to Bible virtues. And his followers, Wycliffe's followers were known as Lollards. Okay, so Lollardry means attacking the beliefs and practices of church. It was not, Wycliffe was not an atheist. He was not a non-believer, but he was a Christian, and he was a Christian reformer. He understood and recognized the mispractices or malpractices and corruption going on inside and in and around church. That's how he called for a reformation in church itself, and his followers were known as Lollards. Lollardry means attacking the beliefs and practices of church. So he urged a complete reforms in church. A general discontent about church was going on throughout these ages, or from this age we could see that people were questioning more and more the activities of church. He also has composed some major works in church, I mean in English as well, sorry. So the major works were The Truth and Sacred Scriptures, came out in the year 1378, and The Pope's Power he composed in 1379. Then Apostasy came out in the year 1379, and On the Eucharist, published in the year, or came out, he composed it in the year 1380, and Trialogue came out in the year 1382. So these are the major works by John Wycliffe: The Truth and the Sacred Scriptures, The Pope's Power, Apostasy, On the Eucharist, Trialogue. So if you cannot remember the year of composition, you obviously can remember some of the names of Wycliffe's works. So he also has written in English so that common people can understand and read and understand it. So that's all about some of the major details about age of Chaucer. Please do remember the time period of Chaucer's age, 1342 1400, and also remember that major events happened during this time: the 100 Years of War, the Black Death, the Peasants Revolt happened in 1381, and also remember Chaucer and his major works, especially Canterbury Tales and his major literary forms of the age, alliterative poetry and romances were there. And also please remember the contemporaries of Chaucer, in the name William Langland, John Gower, and reformer of the age Wycliffe as well. So I hope you have got some idea about this age, and also if you have any suggestion, any questions, any queries, please do make a comment in the comment section and subscribe to my channel, that I forgot to tell. And thank you for listening to my video, and let me meet you in the next video. Bye bye.